Okay, so dissociative disorders. This is correctly spelled. I oftentimes get people asking me in class, did you spell that wrong? Dissociative. A dissociation is when you have a separation of your conscious awareness away from your thoughts, your memory, your bodily sensations, your feelings, or identity. So like your conscious awareness of what's going on is not necessarily connected to what's going on right now and being collected through your sensations. Or it's not necessarily connected to your memory of yourself or your self-identity, things like that. Now, one kind of dissociation we already talked about in earlier chapters, and that's repression. Repression is where you can't remember a specific event. Freud says that if it's really painful, you'll put it into unconscious where it won't intrude, right? You won't have to think about it anymore. That's a type of dissociation where you've got a separation between what you know and what you have experienced. Then there's psychogenic amnesia. It's a little bit bigger version of repression. Psychogenic amnesia is when you can't remember a specific period of time. It's called psychogenic because it's not an amnesia that has happened because you got some kind of head injury and brain damage of some sort. Instead, everything's intact. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to remember this except for that your psyche doesn't want you to. And so you can't remember a specific period of time. You have dissociated yourself from your own memories. So in a repression, you might repress your recollection of one event of child molestation that you experienced when you were a child. And you just put it into unconscious and you don't remember it. And you literally don't, you have the sensation that you really don't remember it at all. In psychogenic amnesia, let's say instead that abuse occurred over a period of time, over the school year or something like that. Psychogenic amnesia would cause you to forget everything that happened during that school year. You can't remember anything from that period of time, not just the events, but everything associated with. So you can't remember who your teacher was or who you sat next to in class. Now I have to point out, Freud thinks that we all have, or Freud thought because he died a long time ago, but he thought that we all have psychogenic amnesia for the first 3 or 4 years of our lives because such traumatic things happened to us. We were born, we got weaned, we got potty trained, and he thought those things were very psychologically stressful. And so to distance ourselves, we dissociated. We can't remember it because it was too painful. Of course, memory researchers say you can't remember it because it's not stored in an accessible format. That's a whole other thing. But Freud thought all of us have dissociated at least some of our lives. I'd like to point out also that most of us don't remember very well most of our childhood. Some of us, we have like high points, things that we might remember, maybe certain mundane things that were done pretty repetitiously, we might remember those. But for most people, our reliable memories don't really start to appear until we're probably 10 or 11 years old. Everything else is pretty hit or miss. A lot of things that we think we remember from childhood are really stories people have told us and we've incorporated, stuff like that. So I just wanted to reassure you that as I'm talking about psychogenic amnesia, that you're not thinking, well, gosh, I don't remember who I sat next to in 2nd grade. A lot of people don't. I don't. I have a vague recollection of the girl that I sat next to, but I couldn't tell you anything specific that would allow us to figure out who I'm talking about at all. Maybe if I looked at the class photo, maybe that would trigger me, but I don't think so. I have such vague memories. Like, for example, I remember when we'd play one of those games where you have to hold hands in a circle. Her hands were rough. I'm pretty sure that won't be in the picture, right? But I really don't remember anything unique, or certainly not her name. And yeah, and I mean, that's really super normal. That is super normal. A fugue state is not normal. This is where you cannot remember anything about your life prior to the sensation that you just regained consciousness. A person who has been in a fugue state will typically find themselves having just regained consciousness. They always characterize it as that. I regained consciousness. They don't have their purse or their wallet. They have no way of identifying themselves at all. They are in a strange place that they've never been before. They've got no money. They don't know anyone's phone number to call. They don't know their own name, but they have the presence of mind to be aware that this is not normal. That if I tell people I don't know my name, they're going to think there's something weird about that. They know the basics like their ABCs and how to talk and all those kinds of things, and they know basic things like I know I need to make a living. I know I need a social security number to make a living. So like they know these kinds of things. But what they don't know is anything personal. They don't know anything that would help to identify themselves. We had a couple of fugue states appear in Seattle in the past. Well, I've been here 20 years now, so since I've been living here, there's been at least 2 that I'm aware of that have people in fugue states saying, I don't know how I got here, I don't know who I am. And then what's interesting is on the other end where they left, oftentimes there's like a car. They've driven away from home and just left their car sitting in the middle of the road, sometimes still running, with the driver's side door open, their purse, their wallet, whatever, sitting on the seat, their cell phone, anything that's personal is sitting on the seat. So for anybody who sees that, you would come to the conclusion that this person walked away voluntarily. And then on this end, they appear and they say they don't know anything, they don't know how they got here, please help me, I don't know who I am. A lot of times, because they know that it's weird, that people will think it's odd, they'll try and cover for a while. And they'll try and get a job. They'll try and go about their normal life. There was this guy, and I show a video of him in class, who went into a fugue state and found himself on the side of the road in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And he walked to Jackson, Wyoming, which is a really long way, and he found work as a day laborer, and then he was able to earn enough money to get himself a little mobile home, and he was living there, and he knew that people would think it was weird that he couldn't remember anything, so instead he told people that he was going through a messy divorce, and he figured, well, everybody knows about that, and nobody's going to ask me details about my messy divorce, and that kept people sort of, got them to leave him alone. He lived like that for like 3 years. And then finally he confessed to somebody who he had gotten to know pretty well that, you know, he really doesn't know who he is, and that he made up his name and he made up his social security number and stuff. And so that person got him on Unsolved Mysteries. And they were able to find his family and things. And what they found out is that he had been embezzling money from his company where he was the accountant. He had embezzled like $25,000 from the company and used it for home improvements and things like that. And they were about to file charges on him, and then he disappeared. Now, it's easy to think that maybe he wasn't really in a fugue state, that he was faking it because, you know, he obviously was in trouble back home, so that's why he left, right? Well, Freud would say, yeah, that's why he left. He was under a lot of stress and under pressure, and he needed to flee psychologically, so he developed this fantasy that he doesn't know who he is. So that's very consistent with what Freud said a fugue state is about. What's interesting about this whole, you know, we always get skeptical and we're like, he's faking it, right? Had he stayed away just 6 more months, he'd been gone for years. If he had stayed gone just 6 more months and not revealed himself, the statute of limitations would have run out on his crimes. It kind of implies he forgot the crimes or something, right? Because why would he have come out of hiding? When they found him, when the family came and, you know, got him and stuff, he did not recognize them. He's like, no, do you remember me? He's like, no, not really. He hadn't gotten his memory back, or he hadn't given himself access to it. It's quite bizarre. And the thing is, we have no way of knowing whether a person's pretending to not remember or if they really don't remember. In that same vein, we had the dissociative identity disorder, which when I was a student they called multiple personality disorder. In dissociative identity disorder, we can't remember events that occur in parts of our life when we perceive that some other personality has taken charge of our body. So to be diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, you have to have at least 2 personalities dwelling inside of you. We'll call that the primary, and then at least one secondary personality or axillary personality. Did or did not, right? Dissociative identity disorder or not. Okay, it sounds really weird to think that another personality can take over. So what can we say about this? Well, people who have been diagnosed with the disorder, who are then placed in a EEG cap that's going to pick up the brain waves in different regions of their brain and convey it to the computer. When they're in one of their personalities, their brainwave patterns look different than when they're in one of their other personalities. To provide controls, they got actors to play different personalities while they were in the EEG cap, and they did not display changes in the way that their brainwaves worked. So it seems to be something unique to dissociative identity disorder. Some people with this disorder will be left-handed in one personality and right-handed in the other personality. That's pretty hard to do on purpose. I've spent a significant amount of time trying to learn to write with my other hand because, you know, it's good to be, you know, symmetrical or whatever. It's hard. It's really hard to write with the other hand. Visual acuity, there have been cases where the person needs glasses in one of their personalities and does not need corrective glasses in their other personality. So it's hard to say what it is. It's something that people have tried to fake and, you know, to get out of crimes and things. And the thing is, it's really hard to know whether they're faking it or not. It's really like virtually impossible to know whether they're faking it or not. Okay, so how does this happen? Psychoanalytic theory, Freud would say it's diverting the id impulse that's making the person feel anxious, and that way they feel less anxious. So if I let another personality take over for me, I won't have to face the anxiety-inducing situation. My other personality will take it over. Almost every case of dissociative identity disorder that has been documented has been ultimately discovered that they were significantly abused during their very early childhood, probably before they could really speak. And so one theory is that, you know, if you're trying to cope with abuse, psychologically fleeing from it is one way to deal with it. And so in some patients with dissociative identity disorder who were sexually abused, they'll have a personality, one of their personalities will be sort of their promiscuous personality. And the theory is that maybe that was the personality that they used to take on the abuse. If they were physically abused, like you know, hurt, there sometimes will be like a tough older kid as their personality, a tough talking older kid. And the theory is that when you're a 3-year-old who's being hurt, a tough 7 or 8-year-old would be your savior, right? Who could come and take on the abuse for you or stand up for you, speak harshly for you. Of course, when you're 35 years old and you've got this tough-talking 8-year-old personality, it's a little odd, but you know, you can kind of see why a 3-year-old might come up with this strategy of trying to psychologically flee. Learning perspective, you know, if you dissociate, then you don't have to face the stress-inducing situation, and that's very rewarding. So we get reinforced for psychologically fleeing from things that are difficult. And then there's the kind of skeptical take on it, the social influence take, that, you know, therapists will encourage people to display multiple personality disorder. You know, it's really exciting to have a case. It's really unusual to have a case like this, and so if you think you might possibly have a person with a disorder, you can imagine that a therapist would be motivated to try and elicit evidence of it. They've had cases of therapists who virtually all their patients had dissociative identity disorder, and not because people who might have it were being referred, but instead because the therapist just kept coming to the same diagnostic conclusion for every patient. Because abuse is present in most people who have the disorder. If you reveal that you were abused as a child, it causes some therapists to look for evidence of dissociative identity disorder. But just because abuse typically precedes dissociative identity disorder does not mean that everybody who is abused has this disorder. So that's an incorrect approach that these therapists are displaying. And you know, of course, you get a lot more insurance money and things like that if you have a person with a really complex and intractable disorder than you get if you have a person who just has, you know, depression or an eating disorder or something like that. So there may be a very bad motivation. Okay, so my last thing I'm going to talk about is personality disorders. So let's go ahead and take a break here and we'll come back and wrap up with that.